Cold air clung to the obstacle course at Fort Liberty, sharp enough to sting the lungs. Floodlights carved hard shadows across wet mud, and boots shifted in place as a full formation waited, breath rising in pale clouds. No one spoke loudly, but laughter still found its way through the dark, low and careless, the sound of men already certain of how this would end. She stepped forward alone. Small compared to the line behind her, shoulders squared, face unreadable. A few soldiers exchanged looks. Someone murmured a bet. Another chuckled and shook his head. A senior infantry officer glanced her up and down, lips curling as if the outcome bored him already. He said something about size, about gravity, about how fast the course would humble her. Then he ordered her to run first, not as recognition, not as trust, as a show. Mud sucked softly at her boots as she took her place at the start, eyes pressed into her back. The air felt heavier now, crowded with expectation. This was not about time or standards. This was about watching someone fail. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to FOB Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Staff Sergeant Mara Hale had arrived at Fort Liberty 3 weeks earlier with a rucksack that looked older than most of the men watching her now. She was in her late 20s, assigned on paper as an intelligence analyst, temporarily attached to an airborne infantry battalion for selection and integration assessment. On paper, it made little sense to them. Analysts belonged in dark rooms, behind screens, not standing in mud at dawn with a course laid out to break bodies. She never tried to correct that assumption. Mara kept her answers short, her posture neutral, her presence easy to overlook if someone wasn't paying attention. She didn't talk about where she had trained or why she volunteered for this assessment. She didn't explain that intelligence, when done properly, meant understanding how people moved under pressure, not just what they said on a report. She let the silence do the work instead. The doubts stacked quickly. She was smaller than most of the platoon, narrower through the shoulders, lighter on her feet. She didn't carry herself with the loud confidence soldiers expected from anyone who planned to survive the course. There were no jokes, no stories, no attempts to fit in. To the battalion, she was an attachment. Temporary. Replaceable. Mara felt the looks anyway. She always did. Her breathing stayed slow, measured, the same rhythm she had used since she was a teenager. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. 4 counts. No rush. She had learned early that breath was the first thing people lost when they panicked, and the last thing they noticed when someone else didn't. She wore old running shoes, the kind most soldiers would have replaced twice by now. The soles were worn in strange places, not flat like normal mileage, but angled, uneven, as if the ground had mattered more than distance. When she knelt to tighten her laces, she tied them the same way every time, looping and tucking with practiced economy, fingers moving without hesitation. It wasn't superstition. It was habit. She counted steps under her breath as she walked toward the start line. Not the course yet. Just the distance. 1, 2, 3. She stopped exactly where she meant to. Toes square, shoulders relaxed. She never once looked back at the formation. The crowd might as well have been empty air. Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Wolfe stood off to the side, hands clasped behind his back, eyes sharp but unreadable. He had seen enough soldiers come and go to know better than to judge too early, but he had also learned not to interfere with how units revealed themselves. He watched Mara Hale the way a man watches a quiet storm on the horizon, not assuming danger, but not dismissing it either. Master Sergeant Cole Rourke was less patient. He didn't hide his skepticism. He leaned toward another senior NCO, muttering just loud enough to be heard, his tone carrying the weight of years spent enforcing standards the hard way. Analysts didn't belong on obstacle courses. Smaller frames broke faster. Quiet soldiers quit first. He had seen it too many times to count. Captain Ian Mercer noticed different things. He noticed how she stood without locking her knees, how her hands rested loosely at her sides instead of clenched. how her gaze stayed fixed forward, not wandering, not searching for approval. He had learned, somewhere between his second deployment and his third promotion, that confidence didn't always announce itself. Mara felt the tension but didn't name it. She had learned not to label emotions that didn't help her move. Doubt from others was just weather. You didn't fight it. You adjusted for it. She had grown used to scrutiny long before Fort Liberty. Used to being measured against expectations she never agreed to. Used to people assuming she needed to prove herself quickly, loudly, or publicly. She never did. She had learned that the fastest way to lose control was to perform for an audience that had already decided how your story would end. So she waited. She rolled her shoulders once, subtle enough that no one noticed, easing the stiffness out. Her jaw stayed relaxed. Her eyes traced the first obstacle, then the second, mapping angles and distances without urgency. She wasn't thinking about time yet. She was thinking about efficiency. About not wasting motion. About letting the course reveal itself one piece at a time. Behind her, the formation shifted again. Boots scraped. Someone cleared their throat. The low hum of expectation pressed in, heavy and impatient. Mara Hale stood still at the start line, calm in a space that had been designed to intimidate. She looked like someone who had already made peace with being underestimated. And that, more than anything else, made the moment dangerous. The space behind Mara filled with sound as soon as she took her place at the start line. It wasn't loud at first. It never was. It began with murmurs, the kind men used when they wanted to be heard but not held responsible for what they said. A laugh slipped out, then another. Boots shuffled. Someone exhaled sharply through his nose, already amused. "She won't make the wall," a voice said, not even trying to be discreet. $10 she gasses before the rope, another answered. The words drifted easily through the cold air, light and careless, as if they were talking about weather instead of a person standing a few yards away. Mara heard them all. She always did. Years of crowded rooms and open floors had trained her ears to catch tone before volume, intent before insult. A senior infantry officer stepped closer, hands resting on his hips, posture relaxed in the way that signaled authority without effort. He looked her over again, slower this time, his eyes stopping at her shoulders, her boots, the thin line of her jaw. He shook his head, smiling faintly, as if indulging a private joke. "This course isn't built for finesse," he said, "just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Gravity's honest. It'll tell you real quick where you belong." A few men laughed openly now. The sound carried farther, rolling through the formation like permission. Someone behind her whispered a nickname. It wasn't cruel, not on the surface. That was what made it worse. It stuck because it sounded harmless, almost friendly, the kind of label people used when they didn't expect the subject to last long enough for it to matter. Mara didn't turn. She didn't stiffen. She didn't smile either. Her face remained neutral, eyes forward, attention fixed on the first obstacle rising out of the mud. She noted the angle of the wooden supports, the slick sheen of rain still clinging to the surface, the shallow divots at the base where boots had already torn at the ground. Behind her, a phone came out. The faint click of a screen lighting up cut through the noise. Someone lifted it, framing the scene, eager to capture what they assumed would be quick and embarrassing. A hand snapped down hard on the wrist holding it. "Put it away," a voice growled. "This isn't a circus." The phone disappeared, but the intent lingered. Eyes stayed sharp. Expectation tightened. A few soldiers shifted uncomfortably now. Not everyone enjoyed this part. Some remembered what it felt like to be new, to be judged before they moved. They glanced at Mara, then away, unwilling to step in but uneasy enough to feel the weight of their silence. Mara rolled her shoulders once, subtle and controlled. The breath she took settled low in her chest, slow and deliberate. She let the noise pass over her without engaging it. She had learned long ago that insults were invitations. If you accepted them, you let someone else set your tempo. She stepped forward without waiting for instruction. There was no flourish to it, no pause for effect. She placed her boots at the line, toes even, heels firm in the mud. Her hands flexed once, fingers spreading, then closing again as if testing circulation. Then they relaxed at her sides, loose and ready. The crowd quieted just a fraction, not because they respected the moment, but because they wanted to see it start. Mara focused on the course again, breaking it into pieces the way she always did. First obstacle, then the gap, then the wall. She didn't think about the finish. Thinking too far ahead was how people wasted energy. She thought about where to put her foot first, and then the next place after that. Her breathing steadied further, each inhale measured, each exhale controlled. She counted without sound, not numbers exactly, but beats, a rhythm that kept her grounded, that kept her present. Panic lived in the future. Calm lived right here. Another comment floated from the formation, sharper than the rest. "Hey, don't hurt yourself." It earned a few laughs, louder now, emboldened by the lack of consequence. The senior infantry officer smirked and stepped back, satisfied. In his mind, the lesson was already over. Gravity would do the rest. Mara didn't react. Not outwardly. Inside, she noted the tone shift. The crowd had moved from amusement to anticipation. They wanted a payoff. They wanted confirmation that their assumptions were right. She gave them nothing. Her gaze stayed fixed ahead. She took one more breath, deeper this time, filling her lungs fully before letting it out in a controlled release. The cold air burned faintly, a sharp reminder that she was awake, present, and very much here. What would you have done in her place? Would you have turned around and said something sharp, something clever, just to reclaim a piece of dignity before it was taken from you? Would you have laughed it off, playing along to make it hurt less? Or would you have stood there, absorbing every word, trusting yourself enough to let action speak later? Most people never know which version of themselves they are until the moment arrives. Mara knew. She shifted her weight slightly, settling into a stance that felt natural, balanced. The mud pulled gently at her boots, testing her footing. She adjusted without looking down, muscles responding automatically. Years of training lived in her body, quiet and patient, waiting for permission to move. Behind her, the formation leaned forward almost imperceptibly. Conversations died out. Even the skeptics wanted to see how quickly this would end. The silence wasn't respectful yet. It was hungry. Captain Mercer crossed his arms, eyes narrowed, watching her closely now. Master Sergeant Rourke stopped talking altogether, his jaw set, curiosity creeping in despite himself. Lieutenant Colonel Wolfe said nothing, but his gaze never left her. Mara stood at the threshold between stillness and motion, unbothered by the weight of attention pressing in from all sides. She had been judged before. She had been underestimated before. Those things were familiar, comfortable even. What mattered was the course in front of her. Wood. Rope. Mud. Gravity. Honest things. The whistle pierced the air, sharp and sudden. Mara moved. Mara did not explode off the line when the whistle sounded. She didn't sprint, didn't lunge, didn't burn energy to prove a point. She moved like water released from a gate, smooth and controlled, her pace deliberate rather than aggressive. Boots met mud softly, each step placed with intent, not force. The first obstacle came up fast. Where others charged straight at it, she angled her approach, shortening the climb before it began. Her hands found purchase without searching, no hesitation. No wasted reach. She went over instead of up, her body folding and unfolding in one clean motion that left the structure behind her almost immediately. A few laughs cut off mid-breath. She hit the rope next. Instead of muscling her way up, arms burning, she wrapped it in a pattern that looked wrong to anyone used to standard army instruction. Her legs did most of the work, locking and releasing in rhythm, her upper body steady, conserving strength. She climbed fast, but not frantically. Efficient. Quiet. Someone in the formation frowned. The wall should have slowed her. It always did. But she didn't attack it head on. She took 2 steps to the side, adjusted her angle, and transitioned upward with minimal vertical strain. Her hands cleared the top just long enough to pivot, her hips already turning as her feet came through. She didn't stop on the crest. She flowed over it, landing lightly, knees bent to absorb impact, already moving again. There was no sound now. Not laughter, not commentary. Just the dull slap of boots and the controlled rasp of breath. She reached the monkey bars without breaking stride. Most soldiers brute-forced their way across, arms locking, shoulders screaming by the halfway point. Mara didn't hang. She swung. Her body moved like a pendulum, weight shifting smoothly from one bar to the next, momentum doing the work her muscles didn't have to. She never paused, never dead hung. She was gone before anyone realized she hadn't slowed at all. Captain Mercer leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. Mara hit the ground running again, stride lengthening just enough to carry speed without strain. She cut corners tightly, shaving seconds where others bled them. Every movement looked pre-planned, not memorized, but understood, as if she knew exactly how much effort each obstacle deserved and refused to give it more. Someone glanced at the stopwatch and said a number out loud without meaning to. It was early. Too early. Master Sergeant Rourke's smirk disappeared. His mouth tightened, jaw shifting as he watched her clear another obstacle with the same controlled economy. This wasn't luck. It wasn't adrenaline. It was something practiced, something ingrained. The course began to feel shorter, the distance collapsing under her rhythm. Mud splashed, ropes swayed, structures creaked, but Mara never fought them. She used them. Gravity pulled her forward, and she let it. The formation changed shape without realizing it. Men leaned in. Heads tilted. Conversations didn't resume. They were watching now, not waiting. Her breathing never broke. It stayed low, steady, almost detached from the effort her body was producing. She looked like someone conserving something for later, as if this wasn't even the hardest thing she would do today. When she reached the final stretch, she didn't surge, she maintained. Same cadence, same control. She crossed the line and slowed only then, hands settling on her hips as she walked it out, pulse elevated but contained. The silence that followed was heavier than the laughter had been. Someone called out the time again, louder this time, disbelief creeping into the edges of his voice. It spread through the formation in fragments, passed from one soldier to the next. Heads turned, eyes widened. A few men looked back at the course as if it had betrayed them. Mara stood off to the side now, calm, gaze lowered as she focused on her breathing, counting beats until her heart settled back into place. She did not look for approval. She did not look for reaction. Captain Mercer said nothing, but his eyes never left her. He had seen something like that before, years ago, in a different context, under different colors. It tugged at an old memory he couldn't quite place. Master Sergeant Rourke folded his arms, expression unreadable, searching her movements for explanation. He didn't find one that fit his assumptions, because the technique didn't look new. It looked old, familiar, almost legendary. Mara crossed the line and slowed to a walk, boots sinking into the churned mud as if the course itself wanted to hold on to her a moment longer. She didn't raise her arms. She didn't look back. She bent slightly at the waist, hands resting on her thighs, drawing in air with measured control. Her breathing rose, then settled, as calm as it had been at the start. For a second, no one spoke. Then someone checked the stopwatch again, thumb hovering as if the numbers might change if he waited long enough. "That can't be right," a voice said. The time was read aloud anyway. It carried farther than intended, sharp against the silence, and hit the formation like a physical force. Heads snapped up. A few soldiers laughed once, short and disbelieving, then stopped. Someone else repeated the number, slower this time, as if saying it differently might make it make sense. Mara straightened and stepped off the course, posture composed, face unreadable. To her, the run was already over. She had finished what she came to do. Whatever happened next belonged to other people. Behind her, the formation shifted again, but the movement felt different now. There was no edge of humor in it. No easy dismissal. The sound that replaced laughter was quieter, heavier. Confusion mixed with something else. Interest. Unease. Master Sergeant Rourke stared at the stopwatch as if it had personally offended him. He looked up at Mara, then back at the course, then at the time again. His mouth opened, closed. He said nothing. Captain Mercer took a step closer to the line, eyes tracking her the way he would track a piece of unfamiliar equipment, trying to understand how it worked. He replayed the run in his head, obstacle by obstacle, searching for a mistake that would explain it away. He didn't find one. Lieutenant Colonel Wolfe had not moved at all. He stood where he had been since before the whistle, hands clasped behind his back, gaze steady. He had seen fast runs before. He had seen impressive ones. This had been something else, not just speed but restraint. Not just strength, but judgment. He waited until Mara's breathing fully settled before he spoke. "Staff Sergeant," he said, his voice even, carrying just enough to cut through the low murmur that had begun to build again. Mara turned and faced him, heels together without snapping to attention, posture respectful but not stiff. "Yes, sir." Wolfe studied her for a long moment. Not her size. Not her uniform. Her movement. The way she stood. Balanced. "Ready." He asked his question quietly, without accusation or praise. "Who taught you to move like that?" The formation leaned in, almost without realizing it. Mara didn't answer right away. She didn't hesitate either. She simply took a breath, as if aligning her words with the same care she had aligned her steps on the course. "I learned from someone who believed efficiency mattered more than noise, sir," she said. That was all. No name, no rank, no story. Her tone held no defensiveness, no pride. She wasn't guarding a secret so much as refusing to turn it into currency. The answer was offered as fact, not explanation. Wolfe nodded once, slow and thoughtful, as if the response confirmed something he had already suspected but wasn't ready to voice. He did not push. He did not ask again. The silence stretched. This time, it was different. The laughter did not return. The whispers didn't either. Soldiers looked at Mara openly now, not trying to hide their attention. They weren't watching her to see if she would fail. They were watching her to see what else they had missed. Mara felt the shift without acknowledging it. She had felt shifts like this before. The moment when curiosity replaced dismissal. When people stopped talking about you and started thinking about you. It was an unstable moment, dangerous in its own way. Expectations could change as quickly as they formed. She stayed still, hands relaxed at her sides, gaze level. If she noticed the eyes on her, she gave no sign. She had learned not to feed moments like this. Attention, like effort, could be wasted if handled poorly. Master Sergeant Rourke cleared his throat, a rough sound that broke the tension. He stepped closer, boots heavy, his presence carrying weight the younger soldiers instinctively made room for. He looked at Mara, then at Wolfe, then back at the course. "Sir," he said carefully, "permission to speak freely." Wolfe nodded. Rourke's eyes never left the obstacle course as he spoke. That wasn't standard army instruction. No, Wolfe agreed. Rourke shifted his weight, jaw working. Didn't look improvised either. "No," Wolfe said again. The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Rourke glanced at Mara once more, this time without the earlier skepticism. There was something else in his expression now. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of it. He turned away, muttering under his breath as he walked back toward the formation. The name slipped out quietly, barely audible, not meant for anyone else. A single word. An older one. A name that belonged to another time. It didn't reach most of the soldiers. It didn't need to. Captain Mercer heard it. Lieutenant Colonel Wolfe heard it. Mara did not react. She stood where she was, composed, the course behind her and 100 questions in front of her. The respect in the air was not complete yet. It was tentative, unsettled, still searching for solid ground. But something irreversible had shifted. They were no longer waiting for her to fail. They were trying to understand who she was. Lieutenant Colonel Wolf took a step forward, boots pressing into the mud with deliberate weight. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The formation was already quiet, the kind of silence that comes when people realize something important is about to be said. "I've seen that movement before," he said, eyes still on Mara, not accusing, not impressed, just certain. "Not here. Not in this unit." A few heads turned, others leaned in. That rope work, the wall transition, the way momentum replaced effort. Wolf paused, choosing his words carefully. "That's not standard Army doctrine. It was never meant to be." He let that sit for a breath. "It's a method," he continued, once taught by a Navy SEAL instructor who believed efficiency saved lives. He drilled it into his people until it lived in their bodies, not their manuals. The name followed naturally, without drama. Commander Nathan Hale. The effect was immediate and total. No cheers rose. No one clapped. The air seemed to drain out of the space, leaving behind a stillness so complete it felt fragile. A few soldiers straightened without realizing it. Others lowered their eyes. The name carried weight, not as legend, but as history, earned, costly, and finished too early. Wolf's voice softened slightly. "He was killed years ago," he said. "Left behind a reputation most of us spend our careers trying to understand, let alone match." Mara did not move. Her head dipped just a fraction, not in shame or pride, but acknowledgement. Her hands folded behind her back, fingers interlaced loosely, posture calm and contained. She did not look at Wolf. She did not look at the formation. She stared at the ground a few feet ahead of her boots, as if anchoring herself to something solid. She didn't speak. She didn't correct anything. Didn't explain how she knew the technique, or how long it had taken to learn, or what it had cost to carry it forward. She didn't claim the name that had just been placed in the open air between them. The silence stretched. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't uncertain. It was respectful, heavy with understanding. The kind of quiet that followed recognition rather than surprise. Lieutenant Colonel Wolf stepped back into place, giving her the space she hadn't asked for but had earned. The formation remained still, every man aware now that what they had witnessed wasn't a trick or a fluke. It was a legacy moving forward. And Mara Hale stood at its edge, refusing to hide behind it, refusing to step out from it, letting it exist without asking it to speak for her. Lieutenant Colonel Wolf held the silence a moment longer, as if measuring it, then brought his right hand up in a clean, deliberate motion. The salute was crisp, unmistakable, and offered without ceremony. He did not announce it. He did not look around to see who noticed. He simply faced Staff Sergeant Mara Hale and rendered respect. The gesture landed harder than any shout could have. Mara's eyes lifted slightly in surprise, just enough to register what was happening. She returned the salute immediately, movement precise, disciplined, exact, no hesitation, no flourish. When her hand came down, she resumed her composed stance, head level, hands once again resting behind her back. For a heartbeat, Wolf was the only one. Then Captain Mercer followed. His salute was slower, thoughtful, as if he were acknowledging not just the run, but the restraint it took to endure everything before it. He lowered his hand and gave a single nod, brief and sincere. Another officer saluted, then another. No one gave an order. No command cut through the air. The respect spread the way understanding does, quietly, person to person. Senior NCOs followed next, hands rising in measured succession. Younger soldiers hesitated, then straightened, recognizing the shift and stepping into it. Master Sergeant Rourke did not salute at first. He reached up and removed his cap instead, holding it at his side. The motion was slow, deliberate, heavy with meaning. He looked at Mara for a long moment, then dipped his head once, an acknowledgement older than any regulation. The skepticism that had defined his posture all morning was gone, replaced by something steadier. The formation stood taller now, not rigid. Aligned. Mara felt the change like a pressure easing off her shoulders. She had not asked for this moment. She had not chased it. But she met it the same way she met the course, without excess, without retreat. Her breathing stayed even. Her posture stayed calm. The respect in front of her did not alter who she was. She did not smile. That, too, mattered. The soldiers watching her understood something then, though few could have named it. This was not inherited confidence. This was not borrowed reputation. This was discipline carried quietly, day after day, long before anyone thought to look. She did not earn respect because of her father. She earned it because she carried discipline when no one was watching. Lieutenant Colonel Wolfe lowered his hand and spoke again, voice steady. "Fall in." The command broke the moment without diminishing it. Boots shifted. Lines reformed. But the air was different now. The laughter from earlier felt distant, irrelevant, like something that belonged to another morning entirely. Mara took her place in the formation without comment, just another soldier among soldiers. No one mocked her size now. No one whispered nicknames. A few glanced her way, then looked forward again, recalibrating what they thought they knew. As the battalion prepared to move on, Master Sergeant Rourke passed her position. He paused just long enough to speak under his breath, not loud enough for anyone else to hear. "Clean run," he said. Mara inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement. That was all. The course behind them sat empty again, mud churned, ropes still swaying faintly. It looked the same as it always had. But something had been proven there that morning, something no stopwatch could fully measure. Respect, when it was real, didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with recognition. The morning moved on as if nothing remarkable had happened. The course was reset. Another whistle sounded somewhere down the line. Soldiers rotated through their assignments, boots finding their familiar rhythm again. If anyone expected Mara Hale to linger in the moment or carry it with her, they were disappointed. She remained exactly the same. There were no speeches, no explanations offered. No quiet bragging passed between ranks. Mara folded back into the routine with the same calm efficiency she brought to everything else. When addressed, she answered clearly. When given direction, she followed it. When left alone, she observed. The respect that had settled around her did not change her posture or her pace. Captain Mercer noticed it first, how she neither sought nor avoided the attention that followed. How she worked without looking to see who was watching. Lieutenant Colonel Wolfe noticed it too. In his experience, the surest sign of professionalism was what a soldier did after the moment passed. Mara Hale gave him nothing new to question. Master Sergeant Rourke watched her through the morning without comment. He saw no shift toward pride, no edge of entitlement. Just discipline, steady and unremarkable in the best possible way. He had spent a career correcting soldiers who confused attention with achievement. Mara made no such mistake. Strength often announces itself quietly. It lives in controlled breathing when pressure rises, in patience when provocation is easy, in restraint when recognition finally arrives. True warriors learn early that noise can be manufactured, but discipline cannot. It shows up whether anyone is looking or not. The battalion moved as one again, cohesion restored, hierarchy intact. But something subtle had changed, not in the schedule or the standards, but in perception. A quiet recalibration of what competence could look like and where it might come from. Mara carried on without comment. The weight of expectation neither added nor subtracted from her purpose. She did not need the course to speak for her again. It already had. Somewhere in the background, a few soldiers would tell the story later, shaping it into something louder than it had been. But the truth was simpler and more durable. Respect is not inherited, it is revealed under pressure. That lesson lingered longer than any applause ever could. The obstacle course stood ready again, mud smoothed where it could be, ropes settling into stillness. Another whistle sounded. Another soldier stepped forward. The rhythm of training resumed, steady and unremarkable, the way it always did after something quietly important passed through. Mara Hale blended back into the formation without ceremony. No one pointed her out. No one needed to. She stood shoulder to shoulder with the rest of the battalion, eyes forward, posture calm, just another soldier preparing for the next task. The moment had ended, and she let it end. That was the truest mark of who she was. Stories like this are not about spectacle. They are about the unseen discipline carried long before anyone chooses to notice, about strength that waits patiently and respect that arrives only when it is earned. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more FOB veteran stories. These stories keep the courage alive for generations to come.